All right, but I do want to focus on really one aspect of this Omer period, and that's an aspect, speaking of self-refinement and self-introspection, it's an aspect that I think needs a lot of work at all times, but perhaps during this time more than any other time. And that's an aspect that's really learned from a terrible tragedy that occurred during this time. Between Passover and Shavuot, 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died. They died in a terrible plague. Maybe it was the plague of croup, as this first reference said. Now, it's quite astounding that 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died, because if you would put it in a historic, I mean, it's deeply saddening, because if you would put it in a historic context, you would see that you would just think about how many more books of the Talmud, of the Mishnah, of Jewish thought we would have if those 24,000 students would have lived. That's just one perspective. But of course, how different would the Jewish world, how many children would they have had? How larger, even in quantity, would the Jewish world be? So it's a tragedy on so many levels. When the Talmud tries to grapple with the root cause of why they passed, no one can truly understand that. But what lesson can we learn from this? It reaches this following conclusion. Let's read reference 1 here. Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of disciples. Does anyone want to read? Come on, reference 1. Yes, Julie or Sue, go for it. One of you. Yeah. You'll do the next one, Julie. Right. Kama, Banaba. Yeah. Right. Very good. So croup was probably the plague, but they suffered a cruel death. And some say croup, some say other things. But I want to go back to that previous passage, and that is all of whom perished within a short period because they did not treat each other with respect. I don't think that the Talmud is answering the why question. No one, as we've said in the past, can answer the why question. Why bad things happen to good people is a question that is unanswerable. And as Lord Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs would often say, it's unanswerable because God does not want us to answer it. If he would want us to answer it, he would tell us what the reason is. But if we would know what the reason is, we would start justifying why bad things happen. God does not want us to justify why bad things happen. The opposite. He wants us to protest the bad things that happen. So I don't think that the Talmud is trying to figure out why, but the Talmud is trying to learn a lesson from this terrible tragedy. What lesson? These students, did not treat each other with respect, and therefore during this period of time, even more so than ever, we should treat each other with respect. Now, it's astounding to me that Rabbi Akiva is known mainly for being the one who taught that love your fellow as yourself. That commandment that we just read in last week's portion, Leviticus 19:18, is the most important commandment in the entire Torah. So how is it that his own students couldn't respect one another when the teacher is the one who said that you should love your fellow as yourself? That's the most important mitzvah in the entire Torah. How does that disconnect happen? That's the big question I want to leave here. But let's first go to the practical aspect of how we commemorate this tragedy, because we do have a slight mourning period during this time between Passover and Shavuot. And this mourning period is expressed in different ways, but these are some of the customs from the Code of Jewish law. For example, one is not allowed to get married during this time. Marriage is one of the highest peaks of happiness, and therefore, because we are mourning, we're not allowed to get married. We are allowed to get engaged during this time, though. Number 2, we're not allowed to attend concerts with live music unless this is one's livelihood. And number 3, purchasing and wearing new garments that bring joy due to the quality. Because again, we're mourning. Now, you're allowed to wear a new garment if you have a business interview, if you're meeting a new person that you might want to date, and so on and so forth. There are exceptions to that too. There's exceptions even to attending concerts, like we said, if it's for one's livelihood and so on. But that's the mourning period we're in. But I want to go back to the question. Why is it, do you think, The Rabbi Akiva, who taught, as the third reference says here, that to love your fellow as yourself is the greatest commandment in the Torah, has students who can't respect one another. How could that be? Were they like rebellious students? Well, why? Yes, Melina. Yes, please. Yeah. That's true. But it doesn't apply to women. Yeah, you see? Can't be too stringent on yourself. It's true. It's true. Yeah. Yeah. And even with men, there's exceptions, etc. But yeah. Yeah. In any case, but why is it Rabbi Akiva did not transmit that message to his students? Because obviously they didn't get it. They weren't respecting one another. Yeah. Maybe they don't have their own self-respect, but still learn from your teacher, your great teacher. Why did he keep them as students if they couldn't follow his most important commandments, his most important teaching? And I want to submit to you this answer. I think it's an answer that again speaks to the core of every relationship. And that is that Rabbi Akiva taught that to love your fellow as yourself is the most important commandment in the Torah. To love. It does not say that they did not love each other. It says that they did not respect each other. Love and respect are two separate things. One may say that they are two opposite things. Because when I love someone, I want to come close to them. I want to hug them. I want to kiss them. When I respect someone, I keep my distance a little bit, just out of awe and out of respect to that person. So they even create two separate reactions. Love draws two people closer, and respect does the opposite. The ultimate relationship is a relationship where I know how to love, but I also know how much to love. I don't love too much, because loving too much without respecting the person would be suffocating the other person with my love. Sometimes I love someone so much that I start telling them what to do, how to brush their teeth, how to get dressed, how to speak, how to behave, how to walk, how to talk. Just that. And you can say, well, I'm saying this to you out of love, because if I don't care about you, if I don't love you, I wouldn't tell you, right? That's usually the line. But that's exactly where respect comes in. Respect is acknowledging that the other person is different, and that other person should be allowed to have his or her differences, and should be allowed to have his or her own spaces, to know when to come close, but also to know when to stay far. The students of Rabbi Akiva did not respect each other. Why? Maybe because they listened to their teacher a little too well. The teacher said, love. They said, okay, we're going to love all our way. And they started telling each other what to do and so on. And then respect was taken out of the picture. And therefore, well, I just want to finish that thought. Therefore, during this period of time, especially, if we are indeed refining ourselves, we ought to refine ourselves first and foremost with this attribute, the attribute of respect, not necessarily the attribute of love. I want to add, because if you think about this, love is really based on that which we have in common. I love sports, you love sports, great, let's go to a sports game. You love good food, I love good food, let's go to a good restaurant. It's to that which we have in common. I can understand you and that quality that you have, and therefore I love it because I have the same. Respect actually relates to that which we do not have in common. I can't understand you, therefore I can't really come to love what you have because I don't understand it. But I respect it nonetheless, because I recognize that you're different. So respect really relates to that which separates us. Love relates to that which unites us. The students of Rabbi Akiva could not respect each other because they loved too much. They always wanted to be one. And I think that's one of the great problems we have in our society. That there's a lot of love, maybe. I'm not even sure about that. But there's certainly not a lot of respect. If someone differs from me because of the way they talk, or because of the politics that they follow, or because of the way they look, or because of the culture they come from, what? Or because of the soccer team that they are fans of, that's right, then I become crazy. And then, there's one exception to that, that's Manchester United, everybody. I'm joking. But I have things to say about their last game. I'm not going to say it now. But in any case, that's really what kills societies, as it killed those disciples. That's what killed them. That's the root cause of it all, according to the Talmud. And we ought to be cognizant of that. That's what kills relationships, it kills societies. Respect is even more important than love. Yes, Hannah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What exactly is love? Like, okay, let's say you have does that mean they love you? And then,
well, it depends. I mean, what is love is a good question. I wouldn't ask what is love. I think we focus too much on love. I think Hollywood couples, for example, love each other. They love each other for 5 minutes, but there's zero respect there. Zero respect. I think we want to define and base our relationships based on love. And I think that's where the problem begins, because relationships are not made just of love. Love is an important element. I'm not saying it's not. But I think what's more important is respect. What's more important is understanding. What's even more important is communication. There's a lot of elements that make a relationship. So instead of asking what is love, or instead of that famous singer saying, I want to know what love is, I'd rather the question be, I want to know what relationships are. I think that would help us much better. Yeah.
what does that mean? I mean, is it
That, whatever it means. Look, there's a great book called The 5 Languages of Love. You asked about diamonds. That's one of the languages. Gifts. Another language is acts of service. Another language is physical touch. Another language is compliments, or words of affirmation, as they call it. And another language is, does anyone remember here? Well, yeah, that's connected. I forget what the 5th language, but anyway, so you have languages of love. That doesn't mean that it's love itself. Love is indeed a feeling that we have that usually relates to that which unites us. And it's a feeling of affection, a feeling of wanting to devote ourselves to the other, and of giving. But it's not the only ingredient to successful relationships. Yes. Right. Thank you. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, Hayden.
not going from one extreme to the other, but it's about balance? Is there something?
So yes, so in spousal relationships, because we also recognize that there's parent-child relationship, which is a different type of love and different type of relationship altogether than husband and wife relationship. But in that context, the Talmud says, for example, that one should love his spouse like he loves himself, and one should respect his spouse more than he respects himself. Again, emphasizing respect more than love. Yes, Julie, did you want to say something? Yeah. Right. That's what it's about. That's really what it's about. You love each other because you respect each other. I think if you don't respect, the love dies down very quickly. Right. Right. Very good. If we want to go a little bit deeper into this, so, and then we'll get to point 2 and point 3. But since you bring this up, I think it's an important point. In Judaism or in Kabbalah, which is part and parcel of Judaism and the soul of Judaism, we speak of 2 different types of love. There's love called fiery love, and there's love called watery love. Watery love is love that exists like water, that flows naturally. And that's the love between parents and children, siblings. That love exists almost naturally. Yes, you have to work on it, but not so much, because it's like a spring of water that continuously flows. But then you have a love that's called fiery love, and that's the love between a husband and wife. And that's a love that has to be worked on, just like fire. Now, it's interesting, because just like fire, if it's worked on too much, it burns, it explodes and burns. If too little, then it dies down. So even in that type of love, you have to know how to nurture it, just like you have to nurture fire so that it doesn't die down, but also how to give each other space, how to exercise respect, as we're speaking about, so that the fire doesn't explode and burn you. Yes?
Is that how going to be very religious to meet like a husband, future husband, and wife,
Right.
where they're getting to know each other. They're not acting out in love and affection, etc. And then they're getting to know each other to start out as to find out if they
Right.
respect one another to.
Right. I think so. I think that the whole art of matchmaking in that world is also designed based on finding a healthy balance between love and respect and giving the other space so that, you can come to know each other and then harmonize with one another instead of just being enmeshed.
Because at that point, they would be respecting each other
Right.
first and before.
That's right. That's right. I really think so. And I think, again, I think many relationships, you see, we read too many novels and we watch too many movies. So we think that relationships are all happy-go-lucky and all based on love, love, love. And then what happens is this. I'll tell you what happens. I see it all the time. Is that couples, after a few months, if they're lucky, after a year, they're lucky, of marriage, they start landing. And then they say, oh, we don't have that spark anymore. We don't love each other that much anymore. Right? What happened to us? So they think they need therapy. Or worse, they say, well, maybe we were just blind. Maybe we should just get divorced. That happens a lot. That's what happens in Hollywood all the time. But that's the society we live in. Why? Because, again, our equation in our mind is relationships equal love. In Judaism, relationships equals love, respect much more. Communication, as I said, understanding, giving each other the ability to thrive in their own way, not just space, but to thrive in their own way. If my wife is an artist and I couldn't tell the difference between a Claude Monet and a Picasso, I still have to allow her to continue to develop that talent. So it's not just giving space, it's encouraging her to be who she is, even though it's very different than who I am. So there are a lot of ingredients to relationships. It's not just love. And that's something I think we ought to change in our society, but it's certainly something that this period of time teaches us. Yes.
So I'm listening to you and I'm thinking that is the illness of the world, because outside of marriage and that kind of thing, we're not respecting one another, and when we disagree, we shoot them.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Right.
Disagree, we ban them.
Right. Right.
Sort of exclude them.
Right.
And or walk away from their property.
Right.
Because they don't agree with you.
Right.
You're not respecting their position. So while I was sitting here, I was thinking that you should write an article for it.
Maybe you should. You're the writer.
That's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned good lessons to the book.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The question is, when you write about respect, do they respect that you wrote about this? Do they respect your article? Yeah. No, good point. Good point. I've written about it a little bit before, but yeah. Okay, but that's certainly one of the great lessons. Yes. Yeah.
And they have some sort of a thing with the fire.
Yeah, that ceremony, yeah. A fiery love? I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know why they do it. I've seen it. Good question. Maybe because it represents the fiery love. They take a lot of things from us, so maybe. So yeah. Anyhow, so yeah. And this is where this quote comes in, and we'll go to lesson 2 by Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern of Kotzker Rebbe that we mentioned many times. But he says as follows: if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you, and we can coexist. But if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, so in other words, if I try to be like you and you try to be like me, and there's really no boundaries that respect, that really give birth to respect for one another, then I am not, and you are, then I am not I, and you are not you. then the world can exist. What he's saying is really that the goal of the world, to maybe rephrase this a little bit, should not be unity, but should be harmony. Unity means that I have to fit into this melting pot and lose a little bit of myself to be one with you. That's not, that I feel suffocated there. I feel like I'm compromising myself. I feel like a cheater, like a liar. But if I'm allowed to be and you're allowed to be, if I'm I and you are you, and we are all we have to do is harmonize with one another, then the world can be. And that is achieved solely by respect. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two, speaking of a relationship, sometimes yes, we respect each other, but there's something that really we think that is not just different in the other, but something that the other is not doing right. Not just not doing right, something wrong that the other person is doing. So how do you criticize? Where's that fine line between respecting and keeping my distance and saying a word and rebuking the other because they're doing something wrong? They're engaged in a very harmful behavior. Do I then also keep my distance? Or can I then criticize? So Judaism says, yes, you can criticize, but it's not criticizing that you should care about. It's how you criticize that you should care about. And we learned that also from 2 weeks ago, which is a portion that he's read during this period of time to Omer, the Omer period, but that's the portion of Metzorah, in which we speak about people who would go gossiping, that they would be filled with leprosy. Remember that? A leprosy that was called tzaraat. It's not the same medical leprosy of today. It's a different type of leprosy, but nonetheless, a type of leprosy. Now, when a person was afflicted with tzaraat, then a Kohen would come and examine this person before this person would be excommunicated for about 7 days to engage in introspection and say, gosh, I shouldn't have gossiped, and do teshuvah, repent, and then come back to the nation. But before he was excommunicated, the Kohen would have to come and tell him, well, is this tzaraat or not? Maybe you just need a dermatologist. Maybe it's just a different type of rash. So the Kohen would come and examine, oh yes, that's tzaraat. That means you gossip. That means you have to get out of here for 7 days. Now, if the Kohen was a complete ignoramus, if the Kohen did not know about rashes, he would have to come with an expert. Then the expert would tell the Kohen, hey, tell this guy that he's impure, that he has to get out of here. But the question is this, bear with me. Why can't the Kohen just send the expert to this guy? Why does he have to come with him? The Kohen doesn't know anything anyhow in this case. Why does the Kohen have to bring an expert for the expert to examine him and then tell the Kohen right there to say that the person is impure? If I was a Kohen, I would say, leave me alone. I don't know these laws. I want to stay home and watch Netflix. You expert, you go and you tell him if he's impure. You're the expert. I don't know. Yes. Okay, fine. So then still, but then the question remains. If I know the right person, I can still send that right person. I can do the picking beforehand. I have to go with him. Yes.
The expert of skin lesion is just an expert of skin. The Kohen is to help with the tshuva part.
Oh, to help with the return part. Good. Like that answer. Very good. Yes, sir. Why? If the Kohen doesn't know anything, why? Because he's a Kohen. Okay, good. To exercise respect. Good. Very good. That's right. Yes. Oh, okay. So good. So the Kohen, what is a Kohen? We have to understand what a Kohen is. A Kohen is a person that represents love. That's why when they bless us here, every Shabbat, the Kohanim actually say, Amevarech et Amo Yisrael be'ahava, that they are blessing us, the nation of Israel, with love. They use the word love. They represent love. They are walking beacons of love. That's who Kohanim are supposed to be. I don't know if you know any Kohanim, but that's who the Kohanim are supposed to be. Now, when the Kohen had to send this expert, he had to go with the expert. And then only the Kohen could tell the person whether he's impure after the expert examined this person. Why only the Kohen? Because when the person who has leprosy hears that he's impure from a point of love, from a Cohen that embodies love, then he will be able to accept that criticism. In other words, if you are going to criticize someone, make sure you do it out of love. Otherwise, you have no reason to criticize whatsoever, even if you think of yourself as an expert. Even if you say, wow, oh, that's it's my field. I'm an accountant. I know this guy is fraudulent. No one's going to tell me he's not. If you are not doing this out of love, then you got to zip it up. Every criticism must come from love. If it doesn't come from love, that's where the criticism is not allowed. It's simply prohibited in Judaism. Yes.
So the results are better when it comes to love.
That's right.
Delivery.
Everything's better. The results, the delivery, the way that the person will change eventually thanks to your love. I want to share with you a story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe who was approached by a rabbi in the 1950s. This rabbi's name is Rabbi Yochanan Gordon. And the president of his congregation was not someone who had the best values. And he was very disturbed with that because he wanted to lead this congregation with good values and so on. And president, leader wasn't that time. So he went to see the Lubavitcher Rebbe and he said to him, what should I do? I don't know. Should I speak to him? Should I tell the president something or not? And the Rebbe said to Rabbi Gordon, have you ever been to a Russian sauna? What does this have to do with anything? Have you ever been to a Russian sauna? Has anyone been to a Russian sauna over here? No? Apparently, if you go to a Russian sauna, you go into this boiling hot sauna, and when you come out, there's someone with a fig leaf, that smacks your back. And, right? And apparently it feels really, 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 really good. So that's what the Rebbe is now explaining, Rabbi Gordon. A nice conversation between two great rabbis. And then the Rebbe says to Rabbi Gordon, but let me ask you a question. If you would go to someone in the middle of the street, some stranger, with that same leaf, and you would go and smack them, would they tell you what they say in the Russian sauna? Give me more. This is so nice. I'm loving this. How would they react? So I think we all know how they would react. We would have been that stranger who would have maybe reacted in a not so nice way. The Rebbe says, same here. In order to criticize someone, before you smack someone, make sure you envelop them with warmth. Make sure you are like a sauna. You give them all the love that you want. You really believe in it also. And then you'll be able to hit them with the leaf. But if you don't have that love, if you don't have that warmth, it's not going to work. And it was one of the best pieces of advice Rabbi Gordon says he received in his life, in his rabbinic life. And indeed, if you don't love someone, it's true for our children too. We are quick to criticize our children, but if we don't love them, we can't criticize them. And you could say, well, I love my children. It's natural and everything. They have to feel that love. It's not what you feel. It's what they feel. If they don't feel that love, then you should keep quiet. It's not going to work anyway. So that's really that. And that was the secret of Jacob. And we'll go to lesson 3 soon. But Jacob, it's interesting because there's a story in the Torah where Jacob is now running away from his brother who wants to kill him, if you remember that story. And on his way, he stops at Haran, where there are shepherds there at the city center that are slacking really. And he even tells them, he criticizes them. He says to them, I'm going to read from the verse here. The day is yet long. Let's look here at the top of page 2. He says to them while he engaged in a conversation with them first. Well, let's go to the bottom of page 1. Let's read the full reference. Bottom of page 1. And Jacob said to them, in fact, does anyone want to read? And Jacob said to them, my brother. Yes, please, Julie, go for it. Right. 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 Read the Rashis to explain that sentence. Days yet long. Right. It's an interesting story of the Torah because Jacob is here is a complete stranger and he meets these shepherds and he says to them, hey, you're slacking. You're supposed to be at work. What are you doing here? The sheep are supposed to be in the mountains, not here by the well. And they respond to them. They say, no, we have a good answer for that. That's because, again, we cannot do that until all the flocks are gathered together. They engage in this conversation. How did that come to be? How did these shepherds even engage in this conversation with Jacob? If a stranger, just imagine, you're at work, and then you leave work, no one knows. You're not supposed to leave work. And then some stranger says, hey, aren't you supposed to be at work? At best, you would ignore them, right? Would you engage in a conversation with them? You say, hey, or would you say, it's none of your business, leave me alone, take a hike? Yeah, they're engaging in conversation with them. What was his secret? His secret is simple. At the very beginning of his conversation, how does he call them? My brothers. Achai. When you show that you love someone else like a brother, then he'll listen to you. Then he'll engage in conversation with you, even if you're in the wrong. And that's what we've been saying. So element number one of a relationship is respect, 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 and more respect. Element number two is criticize, but only with love. Otherwise, don't criticize at all. Lesson number three, speaking of relationships, because this is really what this period of time is all about, creating the perfect shadow. I don't know if we've studied this in the past before, but this basically speaks about three types of shadows. And I want to focus this lesson on relationships, because there are three types of shadow according to the Midrash. Three types of shadows that we create. Each and every one of us creates. Some people create shadows like birds. Some people create shadows like walls, and some people create shadows like trees. What's the difference between the three? Birds really don't have a shadow. It's fleeting. It's here, and then it's there, and the next second it's there. It's fleeting. Some people create shadows like walls. Walls only have shadows when? If you're a wall. Thank you, when the sun goes down, sometimes in the morning too, but certainly not in the middle of the day, right? Because the sun is right on top of it. Only when the sun is on its side does it create a shadow on either one of the sides, depending on where the sun is. Then you have the shadow of a tree, which creates a shadow when? All the time. And the Midrash says as follows: there are people who leave no shadow in this world. They're in it just for themselves. They live just to satisfy their own pleasures. It's all about them, their ego, their selfishness. They are like birds. No shadows whatsoever. When they die, it's as if they had not lived at all. Some people are like walls. They leave shadows either at the very beginning of their lives or at the end of their lives. Beginning of their lives, because children are happy and they certainly spread joy, etc. And then at the end of their lives, they say, gosh, we've really been focused on me this whole time. Yes, it was our career, our goals, our objectives, or whatever. And now let's become philanthropic. Now let's give back, which is an expression I've never understood, because in Judaism, we don't believe in giving back. We believe in just giving. You don't have to wait to receive in order to give back. I don't understand who made it up. I don't know. But it's certainly not a Jewish expression. These people that create the shadows of all, they do believe in giving back. It's better late than never, but they do it only in the beginning or at the end of their lives. And then you have the shadow of trees, which is really the shadow we should aim to create at all times. People that are really impactful, that the only goal is not to live for themselves, but really to live in order to make an impact, positive impact on the world. Those are the people that create a shadow all the time. How is this connected to relationships? Because I think that very often, and I'm sure people who have engaged in such sour relationships will tell you, very often we fight with people. We are enmeshed in such trivial conflicts. And a year goes by, and 5 years go by, and 20 years go by, and we look back and we say, gosh, instead of taking this relationship and truly making an impact, I've wasted it completely. And sometimes it's too late. Or sometimes it's not, and then we can still save it by creating a shadow of a wall. But unfortunately, these trivial conflicts are seen all around us. And I say to myself that the greatest tragedy is not necessarily the conflict itself, but it's the waste of time, the waste of energy, the waste of emotions that goes into this conflict, when so much more could have been done with the same resources, emotional resources, financial resources, time resources. So much more could have been done to create a shadow. Yet we're so involved in our ego, in ourselves, in our hurt, that it becomes a fleeting shadow, like the shadow of a bird. And that's really another aspect of relationships that we ought to talk about during this Omer period. So I just want to summarize. Now I want to leave some room for questions, but I do want to summarize, because this period of time is a period of time in which we think of these deaths, these terrible deaths of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, as the Talmud says, because they did not respect each other. So we ought to work on relationships during these times. 3 aspects of successful relationships are: number 1, respect, 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 and more respect. Yes, a little bit of love and other things too, but mainly respect. Aspect number 2 is, if you are going to criticize, make sure you do it out of love. Otherwise, don't say anything. And it's love that not only you feel, but it's the love that your person that you're speaking to must feel. If you say, I love this person, that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Well, he's not feeling your love, so it's not going to help. So the other person has to feel your love. And number 3, make sure that you don't enmesh yourselves in trivial conflicts and in stupidities and banalities, because really it's wasting so much time, so much resources, while it could be used to really create a shadow of positivity, a shadow of impact, a shadow of good influence in the world that our world so desperately needs.